All right, everybody, the 2024 NBA playoffs are here and they are rolling. And the team that has been rolling so far in this playoff run are the Minnesota Timberwolves. They have I won't just say a star, they have a superstar in Anthony Edwards. Also, the likes of Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, just to name a few, have made the Timberwolves roll not just during the regular season, but so far make noise in this postseason run. To talk more about the Timberwolves' win over the Phoenix Suns in the first round, also talk about some of the impact players, also the Timberwolves' next series against the Nuggets, and much more. Let's welcome him to the program. He is a basketball and baseball content creator, loves his Minnesota Timberwolves. We haven't had him on in a while, but it's good to have him back. Let's welcome him back to the program, Jackson Lloyd. Hey, Jackson, welcome back to the program, my man.
Thanks for having me back on. Always great to come and talk about the team. And this season, they're having a tremendous playoff run, so it's been really fun.
Absolutely, Jackson. And again, thank you so much, as always, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us on the program. Before we get into the T-Wolves series against the Nuggets and also the fans in Minneapolis, the Timberwolves, they just ran roughshod on the Phoenix Suns, sweeping the team, including dismantling the big three of Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker. What were your takeaways from the Timberwolves sweep over the Phoenix Suns?
The Suns series was eye-opening for me because I thought it would be a lot more competitive. I actually picked the Suns, maybe naively, to win the series, but what stood out to me was the Timberwolves, especially from not only the front court but also the perimeter. Their players were just able to get into the ball, maintain a level of physicality, and really disrupt the Suns enough to where, with Yusuf Nurkic, for example, was really jarring how much Rudy Gobert could exploit that matchup with his lack of finishing. While for the most part, Durant and Booker, Beal, they played relatively well. I think that they contained the Suns' offense enough to really turn the series into a grind. And from a look and feel standpoint, they controlled the large majority of the series. I felt that much of the series was on the Timberwolves' terms. The Suns never really got to play their kind of style of basketball, getting into easy pull-up jump shots, reversing the ball, playing off that. There wasn't a lot of that. It was more or less completely on the Timberwolves' terms.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one, Jackson. It was a surprise to me, too. I had the Timberwolves winning the series, but I thought it was going to go at least 6 games. No one saw a sweep coming. I'm with you on that one, but certainly you mentioned some of the gentlemen that really stepped up their game, particularly in this series, and you mentioned about Yusuf Nurkic not having any answers for Rudy Gobert. I mean, when we talk about Rudy, right, winning another Defensive Player of the Year award, we'll get to that in just a little bit, but were there any other things that caught your eye with the T-Wolves, I mean, successfully sweeping the Suns?
I mean, of course, Anthony Edwards is playing great, but I think that both him and Karl-Anthony Towns have had really strong playoffs from a decision-making standpoint. If there's been one knock against their games, it's been that aspect, and some people have even gone as far as saying that they need to make their teammates better. Me personally, I think that we've seen consistent strides, and there's going to be hiccups in games where it doesn't look as great. We'll see how the late-game offense progresses in the playoffs, but I think that especially with Towns often being guarded by smaller players now, he's been able to exploit those matchups, beat guys off the dribble, and of course everyone knows he's a tremendous jump shooter, tremendous just overall big man from a talent standpoint. Very few players can mimic his skill set. So to have him and Edwards playing so well, especially with Towns off the injury, has, I think, turned a great team, starting caliber players, however many you want to say, into a team that has vaulted into contention behind those two and the defense of Rudy Gobert.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You mentioned about Anthony Edwards. We'll get more into him in just a little bit, of course, with Karl-Anthony Towns. A lot of people, including myself, believe is the best shooting big man in the league. And I want to start off just talking about Chris Finch. We know Finch, I mean, listen, he's done a fantastic job so far in his time with the Minnesota Timberwolves, was a finalist for this year's Coach of the Year honors, somebody who's continued to just get better seeds year in and year out. And we know about Finch having an unfortunate tangle up with his player Mike Conley. He's winging it out. He's a tough guy. He's currently doing his thing on coaching, well, from the bench on crutches with the Nuggets side of things. But I want to talk specifically just about Coach Finch leading up into this point, including what he did in the Phoenix series. Just give me your thoughts on Coach Finch thus far.
I think that Finch has done a great job with the team. When he took over, a lot of people emphasized how he altered the offense and helped, at the time, players like Zelo. But I think that defensively, we've seen different variations of the team where a couple seasons ago they played a very aggressive pick-and-roll coverage. Now they hang back more with Gobert defending screens. I think they've fit and balanced that well, especially with Towns playing more of the four now. They're playing a lot of double big lineups with Naz Reid too. And then beyond Chris Finch, I think Nori's done a good job more or less filling in this playoffs, or at least increasing the workload and kind of a shift of responsibility, obviously, with Finch being unable to move to the same degree, obviously has pain restrictions and whatnot. So I think that Finch and his staff have done a tremendous job of taking the team, turning them into a good team. Then they got the roster together. I know it was a divisive trade at the time, but they've done a good job of taking a team that many people question the fit and, completely honest, the long-term standing of, and they've turned them into, I don't want to get ahead of myself as a Timberwolves fan, but they look like a powerhouse, a team that every single night you can rely on the defense. You can rely on Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels. Those guys, they're going to get into the ball. They're going to get over every screen. They're going to rear-view contest. And then on the backside, you got Rudy Gobert in a drop, retreating, contesting the rim, taking away everything. Those are kind of absolutes that are there every single night. And when you have that as your kind of backbone, and then offensive talents like Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns, under the stewardship of Mike Conley, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's a perfect team because, again, there are issues at times offensively, but it's just been a dream to watch as a fan. And in my opinion, they're one of the most fun teams to analyze, too, because of how unique their kind of roster construction is.
You're absolutely right, Jackson. They're definitely a fun team to analyze, and certainly Coach Finch has done a great job, as you said, thus far as the head coach of the T-Wolves in managing the talent with the likes of Edwards and Towns, and then with Gobert and McDaniels and the other ones that are on that roster. Somebody that has been solid with this team, we talk about the mainstays and the quote-unquote superstars, but Kyle Anderson's been a nice addition since he's been in Minnesota, coming over from Memphis. Give me your thoughts on Kyle's play in the series in Phoenix, or within the series against the Suns.
Kyle Anderson, he's a very hot-button player on the Minnesota Timberwolves because his role has kind of shifted from last season with Naz Reid playing more minutes, with Karl-Anthony Towns being healthy. People have highlighted the jump shot completely escaping him this season, some of the turnover issues, but in Game 2 of the Denver Nuggets series, he gave one of those kind of role player performances that will be the stuff of memory, I think, for Timberwolves fans if this turns into a legitimate playoff run where they advance to conference finals, NBA finals, etc. Only 6 points. You're never going to get to scoring with Kyle Anderson, but you know that he's one of the better defenders in the league. He's a matchup player for them in the sense that he's going to guard some perimeter-based wing scorers, but they can always treat him as kind of a traditional, not traditional, but a guy who can guard power forward, even some big men. And again, only for 9 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 steals, 1 block. One of those quintessential players who fills up the kind of box score in non-traditional ways, especially for a guy of his kind of size. He's a very unique player where he's not, I don't want to say he's very limited athletically, but he's a player who doesn't get off the floor very well, not exactly a quick switch athlete, but he has enough in terms of like quickness to stay in front of guys. Obviously, his offensive game is predicated on shot fakes and kind of getting into the cracks of the defense, but really unique player. I think that he's not going to be a fit in every single lineup, but he's a big part of the team, and I'm really glad that in a contract season they did not trade him.
Kyle Anderson, he's somebody that comes through when necessary, and you said it best about him, Jackson. I mean, with the minutes being cut due to Karl-Anthony Towns, but when he's in there, again, not the fastest guy, but he's somebody that can get you some good shots when necessary, and his defense is really what makes it all worthwhile, and certainly Kyle has been a big part of that thus far in the playoff run. Jaden McDaniels, Jaden McDaniels, man, you talk about somebody that's impact, not just with his defense, but really with his nice mid-range game. He was very effective in the series against Phoenix. Give me your thoughts on Jaden's play.
Jaden McDaniels has been one of the biggest I don't want to say discoveries because he was a first-round pick, highly regarded high school prospect, but aside from hitting on the Anthony Edwards draft pick, Gerson Rosas selecting Jaden McDaniels in that draft literally altered the course of the Minnesota Timberwolves franchise. He's that young piece that when everyone said, oh my gosh, the Timberwolves traded all their draft assets, they gave up multiple rotation players, they gave up a couple young guys like Balmero at the time, who some people thought were players. At the end of the day, Jaden McDaniels is not a perfect player. Some people will see some of the shot making he has off the dribble from the mid-range, obviously the catch and shoot ability to some extent, and people will say, why did he only score 4 points in this game whenever he has a bad shooting night or whatever. On this team, you can't really control that. They're going to play through the stars. The shots aren't always going to be there. But he's had a couple blow-up games, which is great to see anytime you get a role player to step up. But every single night, he's going to be the guy that primarily guards the best perimeter-oriented player, as well as Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Those are two of the best in the league, all-league caliber type defenders. But to have a player like him and then be able to extend his contract, have him under team control, and just kind of have him in the building, develop him, and just alongside this core. I don't view it just as Anthony Edwards' timeline. I view Jaden.
Yeah, Jaden is definitely a big, important part of this team thus far, and what he's done and what he's continuing to do for the Timberwolves. And somebody that has been a big piece thus far is Naz Reid. Of course, he is this year's NBA Sixth Man of the Year award winner. What a season for Naz. We've talked about briefly about the big guys with Gobert and Towns, but Naz Reid can really stretch the floor, and he definitely did that in the series against Phoenix. Give me your thoughts on Naz's play and what he brings to the table.
Naz Reid is one of the best stories in the NBA. When he came into the league, again, highly regarded high school prospect, goes undrafted, drops a ton of weight, gradually earns more playing time. When Towns gets injured last season, just totally breaks out, rolls that into a new contract, and now he's part of one of the best teams in the league and an essential piece. There are games where, he looks like he's less important than a Karl-Anthony Towns, of course, but something he gives the Timberwolves is the ability to kind of mimic a lot of what they do systemically when Towns is either sitting or not playing. And for a big man who is currently on a minute restriction to some extent, gradually working his way back from the meniscus injury, having a player in Naz Reid's caliber, not to pick up the slack by any means, but to just fill in, not only do his job, but exceed his job. A lot of players who get increased opportunity due to injuries, minute restrictions, stuff like that, they can fill a job, they can fill a void, but they're just that. Naz Reid is a talented enough player that he gives this whole team a completely different dimension. The frequency that he shoots three-pointers is insane, even compared to Towns. He isn't as good of a shooter as Towns, but he definitely emphasizes that aspect of his game more. A great driver, good touch with both hands, can occasionally get a bucket in the post, very quick feet. Just, I never saw this stuff coming with Naz Reid. Just his story has been one of the best things that I've personally got to witness as a fan. This has long been a franchise that has missed out on I don't want to say players like that, but stories and continued success like that. Fans that felt the rug is always getting pulled out from underneath them. So to watch this team go from a promising young player to a pivotal piece of a contending team has been awesome to watch. He's a unique player. He's a player who probably plays more in every other team in the league, but on a team with Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, he has to sacrifice to some extent. And yes, he won Sixth Man of the Year, but again, major credit to him. being able to put any egotistical factors aside, and the understanding that, yes, he would be playing more on other teams and not only do his job, but kind of transcend what the majority of teams are asking in one of their backup big men. He's one of those players, he can play the 4 or the 5. He's not just locked in, put in 10 in the lineup that he can only play the 5. He constantly plays the 4. I would even consider him more of a 4 this season, whether he's playing alongside Gobert or Towns.
You're absolutely right about that, Jackson. And again, when you have guys, when you're playing alongside guys like Gobert, Towns, and even with Edwards, I mean, it's only so much ball to go around, but so far so good. And Naz Reid has definitely found his place early on in his career, and especially with the Minnesota Timberwolves as this year's Sixth Man of the Year award winner. And with some youth that we have on the Timberwolves, you got to have some veterans and you got to have mentorship. And certainly Mike Conley Jr. has served as a mentor and still a guy who's one of the productive point guards in the league. He's this year's winner of the Twyman Stokes Award winner for being an exemplary teammate, and he's been that, especially to someone like Anthony Edwards, who's still relatively new to the league. And Conley was effective. He was solid in the series against the Phoenix Suns. Give me your thoughts on Mike's play in the series and what he's brought during his time as a member of the Timberwolves.
Mike Conley is quickly climbing Timberwolves fan ranks of most beloved players. I think that everybody understands what he brings as a leader, as a calming presence on the floor. But I think what also helps with Mike Conley, and I was a big believer in D'Angelo Russell and thought he played pretty well for the Minnesota Timberwolves, but doing that swap, it was not just about the temperament or personality of Conley or D'Lo. Sometimes I think some of that stuff can be so overstated, especially once someone leaves the team. There's often a lot of, kicking them on the way out the door. With Conley, I think that you get a player, yes, he's much older than anyone else on the team, but he still brings, as a pull-up shooter, he can make shots off the dribble. He can still play pick and roll. He has great chemistry with Rudy Gobert, great two-man game. And, last season when they did the trade mid-season, they played pretty well for the end of the year. They made up lost ground. They climbed the standings, obviously qualified, playing into the NBA playoffs. This season, it's basically been, from day one, they were first or second in the West pretty much the entire season. And aside from the star players, there's not one other guy that you could give more credit to than Mike Conley. Again, the leadership, the shot making, and the interesting thing with Conley is that despite the common, I would say, correct assumption that older players, older guards, older, smaller guards aren't going to age as well, he's done a great job of kind of holding off Father Time. As a younger player, he was a shot maker. He was a quick jitterbug guard, and he's still quick to some extent, but his growth as a shooter, he's basically a perfect decision maker. All of that stuff is just, it's allowed him to continue to be a great high-end starting caliber point guard. And if you look around the playoffs, or even the NBA in the regular season, there's not a lot of 6', 6'1" guards playing, let alone being a 30-minute-a-game player, starting, closing games, an essential piece. Some would even say that his kind of archetype is almost going extinct. And not only is he holding on, he's thriving still.
You said also all the right things about Conley. I want to stay with Mike Conley just for a moment. You being based out of the Midwest, I believe there was a player that took women's college basketball by storm named Caitlin Clark at the University of Iowa, and she was not just pretty good, she was great in her own right, but somebody that was considered to be the glue of the team or the coach on the court was Kate Martin at the University of Iowa, and they've always talked about Kate being a coach on the court. Is Mike Conley, in your opinion, like a coach on the court for the T-Wolves?
Definitely, and obviously Anthony Edwards is the best player, the most talented player on the team, but you'll watch a game, and if you watch possession by possession, there'll still be times where you think to yourself, just get Mike Conley the ball, let's relax a bit, let's get into a pick and roll with Gobert. And, these things are so hard to quantify, especially in a day and age where everyone wants to quantify stuff with data and, what is the value of X, Y, and Z, et cetera. But there is something to be said about a guy who has that floor game, who can be a traditional floor general. And, a lot, 20, 25 years ago, 15 years ago, the point guard was regarded as a position that would get guys in their spots, would set guys up, and that's kind of evolved into a shot-making position, which is great. But Conley still has that kind of sixth sense of, okay, Gobert, he's going to do all the dirty work. He's going to carry the defense. He's only going to get 6 shots a game. I got to make sure I help him get 4 of those shots for open dunks, stuff like that. And another guy who's had to adjust kind of the areas on the floor he operates is Karl-Anthony Towns, so it's important to get a player like him when he's open for 3, the opportunity to get those catch-and-shoot looks. And I think that it's something that's kind of, I know it shows up in the numbers. He's got good numbers. He's very impactful. It's kind of something that's difficult to quantify exactly, but if you just watch the team, not even every single night, but if you just watch this playoff series or pop in on their games on a somewhat frequent occasion, you'll see the value of Mike Conley. And once you see it, it's kind of eye-opening because he's just an essential player. They would not be here without him.
Yeah, Mike Conley is definitely so important to that team, and certainly somebody that, knock on wood, he can continue to be around a little bit longer for that team. And you mentioned how important he is, not just to Anthony Edwards, but just to that team as a whole as well. And now I just want to get now into Rudy Gobert. Listen, Rudy, we know his pedigree, right? It's all about the defense and the rebounding and getting the second chance points. Congratulations to Rudy. He's this year's Defensive Player of the Year award winner. This is the 4th time in his career that he has won it. Rudy was effective in the series against Phoenix. And give me your thoughts on Rudy and his play against the Suns and what he brings to the table.
Rudy Gobert is, I've always said this Minnesota Timberwolves team is not a carry job by Edwards offensively or Gobert defensively, but the kind of guardrails he offers a team, he offers a defense, the level of consistency he brings on every possession, just by being on the court, the shots that the opposing offense won't take because he's defending in the lane, it just does so much for his team. And he's a player who is flawed offensively, but given his defensive value, so to speak, he does more than enough on that end where there are times you think, oh, Rudy could have caught that ball or maybe he should have finished that layup, but ultimately he's converting at the rim. He rim rolls hard. He's a great screener. That's the aspect that people often don't give enough credit to. And again, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year. He is not merely a good defender. He is not merely a great defender. He is an all-time level defender, a transcendent talent. I said a few days ago on Twitter, how many players could credibly defend a team like the Phoenix Suns with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal hop out and play in Denver a few days later and guard Nikola Jokic, and they do some mix and matching with the other bigs as well to give a different look. But whether he's guarding Jokic or he's guarding Aaron Gordon, he's going to do a great job. And that doesn't mean that he'll shut guys down. You're not going to shut down the multi-time MVP, NBA champion, Finals MVP, but I've never watched Rudy Gobert and thought, oh, he's not doing his job out there. He's just not giving enough. He brings that defensive aspect every single night.
Yeah, certainly somebody that knows their role and somebody that when you think of Rudy Gobert is automatically is just defense, and certainly that's what he's brought to the table during his time when he was a member of the Utah Jazz and then coming over in the trade with the Timberwolves. He's exceeded that and then some. It continues to be the top defender and certainly could be up there one day when it's all said and done with Dikembe Mutombo and some of the top defenders in the league. And let's talk now about Karl-Anthony Towns. In my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions, the best shooting big man in the league. Karl was automatic in the series against Phoenix. Give me your thoughts on Cat's play against Phoenix and what he's continued to do for the franchise.
I'm just so impressed with Karl-Anthony Towns. I always tell people when a player has a knee injury, especially if it's a knee, not that you're wishing anything bad to them, but just kind of prepare for the worst-case scenario, not to be kind of a downer, but oftentimes, especially once the playoffs get rolling, players are trying to come back and play through injuries that they just might not be able to. With Towns, he recovered on an extremely accelerated timeline, and you don't even need to get any details to what that entails. When you say knee injury, knee surgery, we all understand what that means, especially when it's something like the meniscus. So I'm impressed on that front. I mean, as you mentioned, he played so well against Phoenix. He's playing well against Denver. And yes, there have been times where he's still gotten into foul trouble, but just watching him, kind of being able to exploit matchups against smaller defenders, play well off the drive. You mentioned earlier in the show he's one of the best shooting big men ever. He's probably the best shooting big in the league right now. And he's one of the longest tenured players with a franchise in the league. So him being able to experience this run with the team, the fans being able to watch it, he's been there his entire career, family tragedies, tragedies with the team, turmoil with the team, turmoil with the roster, conflicts with teammates, just so many different moving parts throughout his career. And for it to kind of all snowball to this moment has been exciting to watch because he's one of those players where I've watched his entire career. I've seen almost every single game he's played. I've seen the highs, the lows, etc. So now to be at this point where he has a legitimate shot at an NBA championship, don't want to get ahead of myself, but just incredible. And I'm really happy for him, and I hope that he doesn't take it for granted and that he knows already to this point that he's accomplished so much and that he's given a basketball town that hasn't always had a lot to root for kind of a not life-changing experience, but the Target Center is popping lately, so yeah.
Wow, you had to catch yourself a little bit. You mentioned the championship talk briefly for the Timberwolves. I understand the passion, sir, and certainly Karl-Anthony Towns, he's gone through his trials and tribulations, and right now everything, knock on wood, everything will flow beautifully, continually for him and the Timberwolves. It was a little bit of a scare because, as you said, we know about knee injuries. I mean, we don't have to go into details about it, but when you hear knee injuries and meniscus, as you said, it can either be not good news, it can either be worse, or it would be some time off. But, you know, the power of sports medicine, and Karl was able to get back and be strong, and as they say, so far so good in this playoff run. And when we talk about superstars, rising stars in the NBA, we've talked about Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, just to name a few. Anthony Edwards, I mean, forget star, he is a superstar. Anthony ran Rough Shop. He's been running Rough Shop since he's been in the league, and he had a fantastic series against Phoenix. Give me your thoughts on Anthony in the series against the Suns and his contribution to the franchise.
Totally emerged as a transcendent talent. Nobody can guard him off the dribble. He's getting to the rim at will. He's making jump shots off the dribble. And he has that kind of level of showmanship that's box office. I mean, Minnesota is not a big market. It's probably a mid-market, small market in the grand scheme of the NBA, but he's one of those players that if he's playing, people will follow. People will want to watch Timberwolves games because of Anthony Edwards. They'll want to go to Timberwolves games. And it wasn't always like this for the franchise. Post-KG, there was a lot of really bad basketball being played. And, you know, people say that this fan base, you know, they'll say it's loyal, it's not loyal. They don't show up, they will show up, etc. But I've always believed that it's on the team and it's on the organization to feel the product that people want to watch. And not only have they done that, I think singularly Anthony Edwards is that type of talent to where it's like, oh, Tuesday night in January, what's going on tonight? Timberwolves are playing at the Target Center. Let's go check it out. Yeah, I'm just kind of in awe. You can also mention stuff that for a star caliber player, he's very strong defensively, at least to the sense that he holds his own and he can't be exploited on that end. Obviously, you can't go full throttle the entire 48 minutes, but he more than holds his own. And, yeah, just continued growth as a playmaker, not perfect in that aspect, but I think that we're seeing he's a player who, on the fly, He's been just picking up more stuff year by year, continuing to play well in the playoffs, and he's kind of rolled it into a team that they're never going to be a top 3, top 5 offense, at least with this kind of current build, iteration, roster construction. But if he can get them to be an above-average offense, a top 12 offense, something along those lines, not singularly, but he's the high-usage son of this team. Everything orbits around him. And if he can do that, this team can go to some very, very high places.
I want to stay just with Anthony for a moment. You mentioned about Kevin Garnett, who was, he was highly lauded and highly respected as a member of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I got to ask you about impact players throughout the franchise, Kevin Garnett and to a certain extent Stephon Marbury, also Tom Gugliotta, Wally Szczerbiak. But what makes Ant-Man so different from those players thus far that have put on that Timberwolves uniform?
It's interesting with Anthony Edwards because there have been other elite players to play for the Timberwolves. You mentioned Kevin Garnett, Kevin Love, Jimmy Butler. I think that beyond his skill set, people are gravitating towards him because of his personality. He comes across as so authentic. He's not afraid to give a real answer in an interview. He doesn't want to BS people. And I think that, especially in the social media era of the NBA, there's like a kind of a political aspect where players will say a lot, but they won't be saying anything at all. And I don't blame them by any means because people will take things out of context, be misquoted, make something a bigger deal than it is. And there's so many kind of ramifications of that. So I understand players kind of taking a cautious approach. But even right when he came into the league, he was not afraid to be himself. And some people say that doesn't matter. Sometimes I don't think that matters. But talent level with his personality, and he completely revived the team. It's just been such a stark contrast. Jimmy Butler was great with the Timberwolves, but that was not a fun season and change. There were some chemistry issues. There were some locker room issues. Even if to some extent maybe he was right, he's an abrasive personality, and it just wasn't a fit. With Anthony Edwards, he joined a team with Karl-Anthony Towns, an established star in the NBA, a multi-time All-Star, an All-NBA player, and sometimes that can be kind of conflicting. It's semantics, but whose team is it? What's the hierarchy here? Who's the offense going to funnel through? Those can all be issues, and I'm not saying that from day one it was perfect, but they've kind of established the hierarchy, how the offense is going to flow, and what is the expectation of each player. And I think that just points to the personality that Edwards is, the leadership skills that both him and Towns have, that they were kind of able to sort this out on the fly, especially after last season was so disappointing and Towns missed so much time. They never really got the opportunity to gel with the Gobert Conley core. So to do that on the fly, not only play well, but be in contention. Again, this whole appearance, I feel like I've just been beaming positivity, and I don't want to give the impression that this is a perfect roster, a perfect team, everything is always going to be perfect, but how could you not be excited, ecstatic, and kind of looking ahead with a team like this, especially with how they've begun the second round series?
Yeah, I mean, everything is in place in terms of Anthony, and as you mentioned with Kat and the rest of the gentlemen on that team. Jimmy Butler, Jimmy, how could I forget about Jimmy and his time in Minnesota? Very short, but very productive, but the atmosphere is just different with Anthony being out there. And one last thing about Anthony, the comparisons are starting to come out about a guy that changed the game forever, a gentleman by the name of Michael Jordan. Do you see comparisons with Anthony and Michael, or is it way too early?
I think that, no one's ever going to replicate what Jordan and Magic and Bird and those guys in the 80s did for the NBA in terms of moving it to a place where players just make insane money, television deals, the kind of worldwide access they've given everyone. That will never be replicated, but Anthony Edwards is just as box office as a player. Of course, I don't think he's going to be a top 2, top 3 player of all time, the GOAT, whatever you want to call him. but I think that he can be an MVP caliber player, can be the best player on a championship team, and to contrast him with Michael Jordan a bit before I get into some stuff about Edwards as a player, he was kind of a guy who he wanted to show a certain kind of persona and aspect of himself. I think that Edwards, with him kind of being in his social media era, some players have viewed that as a negative. I think that from a marketing standpoint, from a fan enjoyment standpoint, kind of the authenticity and marketability and access that someone like Edwards gives is great. I saw a tweet from, I think it was the NBA communications page, that Edwards was actually the second most viewed player throughout the NBA playoffs behind LeBron James, and I think that it said he gained the most followers on either Instagram or Twitter. So he has gone from an NBA star to a kind of worldwide star on this stage. And as for him as a player, I always thought that kind of on that Victor Oladipo to Vince Carter line. And then now I watch him and I'm thinking he's better than Vince Carter. He's a better version of just that fierce athlete, can play above the rim, can be an incredible shot maker at 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", and the strength he plays with. There's athletic players. Someone like Jalen Green is very similar in terms of quick twitch and explosion, but what separates him from a lot of these guys is he has that kind of James Harden strength where if you reach in or if you take body contact, he's able to work through it.
That's one thing I've noticed about his game. He does have James Harden strength, but man, he's just quicker, and his ball handling skills are definitely through the roof. And definitely, we'll see what the future holds with Anthony Edwards. But you're absolutely right. I think the times have changed when you talked about Jordan, Bird, and Magic in terms of, you know, with Bird and Magic saving the NBA, and then with Michael Jordan bringing the game worldwide with the TV deals, cable deals, and then with Anthony Edwards coming into the internet, social media era, he's really made a name for himself. It continues to make a name for himself. And I want to talk now. Last time I had you on, Jackson, I asked you about with fans in Minneapolis responding to the T-Wolves and their recent winning ways. I want to ask you, how are fans in Minneapolis, I should say, responding to the Timberwolves being in the playoffs and this continued resurgence?
The response has been tremendous. They actually had a level of the Target Center closed off that they've opened up now for this playoff run, and obviously when a team is playing this well, there's going to be some level of kind of following to it, but I think we're just seeing a total energy shift with a very likable core. There have been even since KG left, there have been a couple other teams that were pretty good, but they just didn't latch the fans to this extent. And I think that this team playing so well for the entire regular season, having players that people enjoy watching, enjoy following, and then building off that with a deep playoff run has just been kind of the perfect cocktail for, I'm hoping, continued fan support, because this has been a franchise that at times has seemed like it's running on fumes and been on life support and had so many issues, even rumors that the franchise would be moved at various points. And obviously now there's the issues with ownership. We'll see how that works out, but I think the vibes are great in Minneapolis.
Yeah, it's just fun to see that not just Minneapolis, but really just the state of Minnesota revival come around the T-Wolves in this resurgence. And I want to stay just with the sports scene in Minneapolis. We've got the Twins, and they've had a good history of winning with championships and things of that nature. The Vikings, we know it's football. Minnesotans love their football, but on a scale of 1 to 10, where does basketball rank in terms of Minneapolis sports fans? Is it football first and then basketball, or is it baseball then basketball? What's the order like in that area?
They will never be bigger than the Minnesota Vikings, but they're certainly, I would say, kind of the second biggest cat in town now, especially with the Twins after last season's playoff run. They slashed payroll and then kind of had an up and down start. Now they're playing well, but this is right now, in May, it's a basketball town now. Once June comes around and training camps start opening across the NFL, it's going to be Vikings, Vikings, Vikings. But for now, people love their basketball. They're getting a great turnout, and I'm seeing so much more kind of go around town. You see more Timberwolves flags. You see a lot of Timberwolves jerseys, just an incredible reception to the team.
Yeah, definitely long overdue, and certainly why not? I mean, you enjoy this great thing that's happening right now with Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns and the rest of the team. And you mentioned about Minneapolis being a small market to a medium-sized market, and we're seeing the big markets, the large markets are important, but last year's champion, the Denver Nuggets, are considered to be small market, medium market city. Do you think that we're going to see a resurgence, or should I say a new era, so to speak, where small to medium-sized market teams are going to get in the fold again in terms of not only winning championships, but possibly getting more nationally televised games on big networks or even on the streaming services?
That's one thing I'm hopeful of with kind of television expanding from kind of network TV and cable to now there's more streaming options, more competitors in that market, obviously TNT, ESPN, etc., to where if you want to watch basketball, you can basically access it to some extent. And my hope with that is that, for example, maybe a team that lost in the first round, for instance, the Orlando Magic, they're probably going to be on national television only a couple times a season. Maybe people will see this playoff run, the league will see the playoff run, and whatever the viewership and reception for the first round series was, and they'll say, okay, instead of 2 national TV games or however many they had, maybe they'll get 6. And I think that with social media, with NBA League Pass, with everything like that, we're in a time where people want to see a team, want to watch a team. We're in a time where it won't just be a bigger coastal market on TV. We're going to see a little bit more variance in that regard. It's always going to shift and kind of lean on the bigger markets like the LA markets, the New York markets, etc. But we're going to see more, at least to some extent, more of a mix and variety across the league, especially if these kind of smaller market teams are continuing to make good decisions and get box office stars like Anthony Edwards, like a Paolo Banchero in their organization. They're going to be more desirable, more people are going to watch, etc.
Man, you talk about the Orlando Magic. What a season that they had. I say they similar to Oklahoma City. I mean, both of those teams, they've really jumped. They are really ahead of schedule. They surprised a lot of people, including me. And Orlando, what a great year. And Paolo Banchero, you put them up there with Anthony Edwards. They're already superstars. And everything works well in balance. It's fun to watch New York, Los Angeles, Boston, Philadelphia, a lot of the bigger markets, but everything works well in balance. You've got Denver and Minnesota, and you've got Orlando and even Oklahoma City and Indiana, just to name a few. And now the Timberwolves, they're in the series against the defending champion Denver Nuggets. Who would have thought Minnesota rough shop so far on the defending champions? Now, Nikola Jokic, a lot of people say currently the best player in the game right now, and Jamal Murray showed his frustration throwing objects on the court, but Minnesota's having their way right now. Just give me your thoughts going forward with the T-Wolves in the series against Denver.
It's been a very, very physical series, and I think that has benefited the Timberwolves, especially with how they defend on the perimeter. Obviously, in terms of playing in the post, Jokic has kind of a almost unmatched level of physicality and being able to work through single coverage, being able to work through double coverage and whatnot. But the perimeter defenders for the Timberwolves, Jaden McDaniels, even guys like Anthony Edwards and Kyle Anderson, when they're guarding on the perimeter, there's kind of a force, an exertion to their game. They're putting their will on the other team, not in the sense of some cliche way. They're actually ramping up the physicality, kind of on that borderline of, is it clean defense? Is it a foul? And I've always said that if teams control the engagement they play with more energy, more physicality, you can kind of get some more leeway. If you think of some of those Miami Heat teams, some of the Nick Nurse Toronto Raptors teams, some of the Golden State Warriors teams, some of the older Oklahoma City Thunder teams, those teams that played athletic and physical basketball, they got a little bit more leeway in terms of like debatable judgment calls, if that makes sense. And I think that, right or wrong, the Timberwolves have used that to their advantage, and through 2 road games have surprisingly dominated and controlled the series.
Yeah, I mean, the way they've come out so far, Jackson, it has been to the surprise of a lot of people, including myself. It was like, wow, they're playing Denver. I mean, they're so far so good. They matched up. They match up pretty well with Denver, but we shall see. I mean, a lot of things can happen in the world of basketball, and it's certainly never a dull moment in the NBA. And, before we let you go, there's another question I want to ask you just about the city of Minneapolis. A lot of people look at Minneapolis, of course, in the Midwest, the middle of America. There's the stereotype that Minneapolis, it doesn't move or it doesn't really pop like the major cities. For those that have never been to Minneapolis, or for those that may have not had an interest in it, what do you tell them about the city of Minneapolis, not just in terms of sports scene, but just in terms of culture with food and things of that nature?
It's a great place to live, especially in the summer. The weather is beautiful. I know a lot of people enjoy extreme heat, in like Nevada, California, etc. But if you just love like a breezy kind of 75 to 85 degree day, great water life, whether you're in Minnetonka or Wayzata or really anywhere. And me personally, I like the food scene. I like that, the downtown area, there's kind of U.S. Bank, Target Center, Target Field, all in close proximity. And that's what's fun about the sports teams being good, playing deep into the season, is that we're seeing the fan base kind of monitor the success, follow the success, and then businesses are benefiting from that. I'm noticing that more places are doing watch parties, doing sponsorships with various podcasts, and I don't want to say too extreme, like building a community, but we're seeing this fan base kind of get some steam and get its legs underneath it. And I'm sure that whether you work at a political level or have a local business, local small business, the local sports team being good.
You mentioned that you enjoyed the food in Minneapolis. What are some of the food that you enjoy eating, the different types of cuisine that you enjoy eating?
Well, I mean, if you like steakhouses, this isn't in Minneapolis, I think it's in Edina, but Pittsburgh Blue is really good. People tell me Manny's Steakhouse is good. Me personally, I'm a pasta guy. I can go anywhere with that. I love places like Olive Garden, and I'm not too picky with stuff like that, but I think that it's definitely, especially with U.S. Bank Stadium and Target Field both being relatively new, hopefully they can keep the Timberwolves' next arena in the downtown area. I think that would only lead to more and more growth and expansion for the food scene, restaurant scene, etc.
All right, fair enough. I mean, I've heard about the food scene in Minneapolis continuing to grow and to get better. That's why I asked that question. And there's a NBA media rights deal on the horizon, and there may be the potential that the NBA may no longer be on TNT, and that includes that the landmark studio show with Inside the NBA with Ernie Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, Kenny Smith, and Charles Barkley. What does that mean if in fact, I mean, there's nothing etched in stone, but if the NBA loses, if TNT loses the NBA, I should say, and particularly that studio show, how big of an impact is that going to be if that does happen?
I think that would be an adjustment period for fans, just because a lot of people grew up with Inside of the NBA and that cast that they have and kind of the hilarity of it. But whatever happens next with the television deal, with the media rights, I'm sure that the NBA will get a fairly good deal. And whatever happens, I hope that it's good for the league. Not only that, but I also want it to be good for the fans, where more and more people can watch games, can follow it if they want to watch, and they can do so easily and as financially kind of manageable as possible.
Yeah, I hope so too. I hope I hope the fans will really win out on this. I know it's business and things of that nature, but man, if TNT loses the NBA, that would be hard. But knock on wood, let's cross our fingers and hopefully that it'll be, like you said, it would be a win-win for everybody. All right, so the moment of truth. We know Minnesota has got a comfortable lead in this series, no pun intended, but I got to ask you, crazy question, who wins the series and how many games and why?
I had Denver in 6 before the series. Through 2 games, I've kind of changed my tune a bit. Changed my picks to the Timberwolves, and I think they'll do it in 6 games. I think they'll split games 3 and 4. I think the Nuggets will hold on at home in game 5, and I think the Timberwolves bring it home game 6.
All right, you heard it from him. He is Jackson Lloyd. He's a content creator, not only doing his thing in the world of baseball, but, of course, doing his thing in basketball. Man, Jackson, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. And tell everybody where they can find you on social media. And if you have any websites, let the listeners know that as well.
You can just follow me on Twitter, @Jackson Lloyd NBA. I talk about, obviously, the NBA, some baseball, a variety of other things, but that's where you'll see much of what I'm doing, and yeah.
All right, Jackson, man, this was a lot of fun, man, and it's, as always, you heard it from him again, Jackson Lloyd, content creator, covering major sports, particularly baseball and, of course, basketball. Jackson, this was good, man. Thank you so much, and if ever you want to come back on, just feel free to let us know.
Awesome, I would love to. Thanks for having me.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the channel. Remember to click like, share, and subscribe, and thank you for watching.